"Take that badge off," hissed the salesman. But a minute later, the entire store froze at the stranger's words. What happened next changed not only the old man's life, but also the lives of those who had forgotten. The old man stood at the supermarket window, unhurried. He wasn't looking at the food, he was looking through the glass, as if remembering how it used to be. He was wearing a worn but neat pea coat, military style, with an old button replacing one of the emblems. On the lapel was a tiny badge. It was darkened but recognizable, an eagle with raised wings and the numbers of his unit below it. Behind him, someone coughed hoarsely. "Hey, man, you're blocking the way," someone in the line muttered. The old man didn't react. He was about 75, maybe older. His back was straight, but his hands were shaking. He was holding an apple in his fingers. He was looking at the price tag, but he clearly couldn't read it. He just stood there. A girl of about 7 ran up, almost bumping into him, and dropped a loaf of bread. He picked it up mechanically, handed it to her, and smiled for the first time. "Thank you," she said, and ran back to her mother. The old man remained standing. People passing by were reflected in the shop window. Some had phones, some had shopping carts, some had empty eyes. He stood there as if from another time. At that moment, a store employee approached him. He was young, clean-cut, in uniform with a badge. He glanced at the old man, and at his badge. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, "either you're buying something or you're getting out of here. And yeah, take that crap off." He pointed at the badge. The 2 cash registers in the store fell silent. A woman nearby froze with a bag in her hand. A little girl with a loaf of bread hid behind her mother. The old man didn't move. Only his eyes became slightly moist. He looked at the badge. Then at the salesman. And finally said, "You don't know what you're talking about, son." The salesman snorted. And from the next row, a man in plain clothes stepped forward. He was gray-haired and wore a leather coat. He walked confidently. He wasn't noticed right away. But when he spoke, everyone heard him. "That badge. I recognize it. Now you shut up and stand at attention." The store froze. "Those things," the cashier muttered after an awkward pause, "you can buy them on AliExpress. Now anyone can be a hero." The old man looked at him silently, then turned to the girl standing with the loaf of bread and her eyes wide open. "The main thing, little girl," he said softly, "is not the badges. The main thing is to remember who you are. Even when no one else remembers." And he walked toward the exit without looking back. His name was Pavel Ivanovich. But at the local pharmacy they called him Grandpa Pasha, at the clinic, number 91, and at home, simply, the 3rd floor. He lived alone in a 2-room Khrushchevka with a peeling door and an old lock that jammed in the rain. The key had to be picked with a fingernail, turned, and only then could he enter. The morning began with a cough. Hoarse, lingering, as if he were gasping for air. Then warm water from the kettle, a pill, and 15 minutes sitting on the edge of the bed. On the wall was a faded photo in a cracked frame, 3 men in military uniform, all young. One was him. The others, now only there. The neighbor downstairs, Lydia Pavlovna, constantly complained about the radio. His old receiver only picked up one station, which broadcast concerts for veterans in the evenings. "Your anthem is blaring again," she shouted into the phone to the manager. He didn't take offense. He just nodded. And in the winter, he treated her to jars of jam. She took them anyway. Her pension was just over 10,000 rubles. Half went to medicine. The other half went to utilities. She bought food at a discount. She no longer went to the market. Now there were either silent sellers or ones like the one in the store, with a badge and no respect. Every morning, he went out to the same courtyard where there used to be benches. Now there was concrete and a trash can. Pavel Ivanovich would sit on the curb with a thermos of tea and watch. Sometimes Grisha, a former crane operator, would sit with him. He would tell jokes. Pavel was mostly silent. He didn't seek attention. He didn't complain. Even when his legs gave out and he had to stop at every doorway. But he always went out in his pea coat. Always with that badge. He said it wasn't for others. It was so he wouldn't forget. He often sat in a cafe on the corner, drank compote for 20 rubles, and just listened to people. Sometimes someone would strike up a conversation, and he would suddenly tell them something that made everyone freeze. Once, a barista said, "Grandpa, were you really in Kabul?" "Not in," Pavel replied. "Under. It's hotter there." Those who listened began to look at him differently. But more often than not, no one listened. He would sit there and then slip away into the shadows. Once, a boy of about 9 approached him. He asked, "What's that bird on your chest?" Pavel looked down at the badge, squeezed it between his fingers, and replied, "It's a memory. The kind you can't give to anyone." It was an ordinary day. Pavel Ivanovich was on his way to the store where they sold discounted vegetables in the mornings. On Fridays, Svetofor had a discount on potatoes. He walked for a long time, stopping to rest on an old cane with a rubber handle that someone had left at the entrance a couple of years ago. He went in and picked out 3 apples. He put one back, he didn't have enough coins in his hand. Then he went over to the bread. And that's when it started. First, a whisper behind his back. "Look at him, all dressed up. Again with this crap." Then the sound of footsteps. A young salesman, his face pale, his eyes tired. He nervously pulled on his vest and adjusted his badge. He came up close. "What are you doing here? Are you cleaning the window? Or pretending to be a veteran? Take off your badge. Don't disgrace yourself." His words were as cold as drops from the ceiling. Pavel didn't react right away. He just looked at him. "I told you. Take it off." Everything around them fell silent. Someone turned around. The cashier stopped talking, and the customers at the ATM stopped pressing buttons. Even the background music turned off, as if it sensed that it was out of place. Pavel straightened up as much as his back would allow. "Who are you to tell me what to do? I work here. This is my store. This isn't a theater for old men in uniforms." "You know a lot," Pavel said quietly. "But you don't understand much." The salesman took a step forward. At that moment, a voice rang out from the far aisle, "Kid. Take a step back. And shut up." Everyone turned around. A tall man in a coat and glasses was standing by the shelf with the groats. He wasn't shouting. But his voice was such that it made you want to stand up straight. Even the air seemed to become denser. "Do you even know what kind of badge you were trying to take off?" The store fell completely silent. Pavel Ivanovich left the store without waiting for anyone. He put the apples in an old cloth bag that he had been carrying around since before Ivashka had become an ironic word. He walked slowly, his steps echoing in his knees with a sharp pain. He noticed the glass of the door shaking behind him. Someone was still arguing, but without him. He didn't turn around. Everything was quieter than usual at home. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't even boil the kettle. He sat down in the hallway, still wearing his coat, hat, and pea jacket, staring at the floor. "What are you trying to prove, huh?" he asked himself silently. "Who needs all this? Who needs you?" He touched the badge. The metal was warm, as if it carried the sun inside it. Or blood. Or memories. Once it had been a symbol. Now it was just an object. For someone, a toy from a Chinese website. He remembered how, in the spring, a delivery boy had asked him at the entrance to his building, "Did you really fight in the war?" He had nodded, and the boy had said, "Cool. Did you see the helicopters firing rockets?" His laughter had been light and carefree, as if he were talking about a video game. The old man didn't tell him what he had seen, what he had done, what he had lost. He touched his old knee, something cracked inside it. Then he unclenched his fist, the badge was there. He took it off without even noticing. He looked at it for a long time. Almost an hour. Then he got up. He went to the balcony. He opened the window. The wind was cold, like a farewell. He raised his hand, wanting to throw it away. But he couldn't. He clenched it again. So hard that the skin on his palm turned pink. No, not today. He returned to the room. He put the badge on the table. And walked over to the wall where the old chest of drawers stood. He took an envelope out of the drawer, yellowed, with the words, "Spare route," written on it. There was a business card inside. The phone number had been erased, but the name was legible. Lieutenant General Vishnevsky. Command. Personal communication. He looked at the card as if it were a thing from the past that had returned unannounced. He didn't call. Not yet. But he put it next to him. Next to his badge. So he would see it in the morning. In the morning, Pavel Ivanovich got up earlier than usual. It was still dawn outside, and the streetlights were half lit. He took his pills, washed, and shaved with a razor with a crack in the handle. He put on a fresh shirt, washed a week ago. Over it, the same pea jacket. And he pinned the badge back on. Slowly, like a ritual. Then he sat down at the table. He looked at the business card. He brought it up to his eyes. He thought for a long time. And then he dialed. The rings dragged on like military anticipation, as if somewhere on the other end of the line, a minefield was being cleared. Then there was a click. A man's voice, tired but clear, "Vishnevsky. Pavel Andreevich. We served in the same unit. You may not remember my name, I remember. Where are you?" He didn't explain. He just gave his address. Wait. Today. Pavel hung up and just sat there. He didn't eat. He didn't read. He just waited. He went out into the yard. It was quiet, as it only is in early spring, when the trees are still bare and the air smells of earth, not winter. A girl was sitting on a bench near the entrance. The same one with the loaf of bread. Next to her was her mother, a woman of about 35, wearing a coat with a torn pocket. She was looking at her phone, oblivious to the morning. Pavel sat down at a distance. The girl approached him. "Grandpa," she whispered. "You were in the store then, weren't you scared?" He looked at her as if through a glass of time. And suddenly, without understanding why, he said, "I used to be afraid of only one thing. That I would come back and no one would be home." She didn't understand. But she didn't leave. She sat down next to him. "My mom says you fought in the war. Is that true?" "Yes." "Did you lose anyone?" He nodded. "Too many to count." She was silent. Then she took a pie in a bag out of her backpack. "I have two. Would you like one?" He took it. Not right away. Carefully, as if it were something fragile. He nodded in response. The girl's mother finally looked up. She watched without interfering. She just watched. Then she approached them. "I'm sorry if my daughter, it's okay. She reminds me of someone." "Who?" "My granddaughter. I never got to meet her. My daughter, she's in Canada. We had a falling out. It was stupid. We haven't spoken in 10 years. The woman said nothing. She just nodded. "If you want," she said, "I can give her your number. She's probably looking for you too." He smiled. Sadly, with a kind of faded hope. "I haven't been waiting for anyone to call me for a long time." They stood there in silence. Then the girl suddenly hugged him. Quickly, abruptly, childishly. And ran away. He was left alone on the bench. With a pie in his hand. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lonely. Around noon, Pavel Ivanovich left the house again, but this time he was not alone. 30 minutes after the doorbell rang, a man in a security guard's uniform entered the building. He was reserved, with short hair and a black jacket. He had no stars on his uniform, but he had a bearing that money couldn't buy. He simply asked, "Pavel Andreevich?" "Yes." "Follow me." An inconspicuous gray car was waiting at the entrance. It wasn't an armored vehicle or a police car. Just a regular Skoda. Another man was behind the wheel. He was younger and silent. Pavel sat in the back. The car started moving. No music. No conversation. 15 minutes later, we turned toward an administrative building. It wasn't particularly imposing, but it had a guard post and a flag. The same man who had spoken to Pavel in the store was standing at the entrance. General Vishnevsky. Only now he was in uniform. Full dress, polished, but without ostentation. He looked straight ahead, and there was no regret in his eyes. Only duty. "I'm glad you called, Pasha." "It's not for myself," said Pavel. "I'm not ashamed of myself." "I know." The general led him inside. There was a small room, similar to a briefing room, a projector, a map, water on the table. Behind the table sat 3 men in civilian clothes. One wore glasses, another was bald, and the third was a woman with a folder. They looked at Pavel as if he were a museum exhibit. "That's the one," said the general. "Is he really a participant?" "He was in that very operation." December 91. Southern border. The woman raised an eyebrow. "We have video footage from cameras. We want to understand why." "You don't understand the main thing," interrupted the general. "You see the salesman, you see the grandfather. But you don't see the symbol. People think war is history. But war is memory. It's either with us or against us." Pavel sat down. His hands were shaking. He looked at everyone as if they were children. "I don't want compensation. I don't want glory. But I won't let anyone point a finger at me and call my memory trash." Silence. An hour later, he left. The general walked him to his car. "We'll stop by the store. Today. We'll have journalists with us." Pavel pressed his lips together. "I don't need an audience. But we need to send a signal. That people like you are still alive. That the country remembers them." Pavel didn't answer. He just nodded. And in the evening, as the sun was setting, 3 men entered the same store. One was in uniform. The second had a camera. The third had a voice recorder. Pavel followed them. The same pea jacket. The same badge. The salesman was there. When he saw them, he turned pale. "Is this the one?" asked the journalist. "This is him," replied the general. "And this is the one who said you could buy the badges on AliExpress." The camera focused. The lights flashed. The salesman froze. I didn't know, exactly," said the general. "Now you know." The next day, the video appeared on news sites. Unedited. Filmed on a phone, an old man with a medal, a salesman with his eyes downcast, and a man in military uniform speaking harshly, without pomp. The video went viral. Thousands of comments appeared below it. "Shame on the youth, that's my grandfather. He walks just like that. I'm proud of him. Where is the world headed if we have to fight for our memories? Grandpa is a hero." Pavla's neighbor, Lydia Pavlovna, brought him a pie. With cherries. She said she had just baked it. Then she sat down and asked quietly, "Is it true that you were with the general?" Pavla shrugged. I didn't do anything. I just stood there. The next day, he got a call from the district administration. They invited him to a meeting. They said they wanted to award him a certificate. He refused. He said he already had certificates. Even ones that smelled of gunpowder. Then a letter came from the school. They invited him to talk to the children during a lesson in courage. He hesitated for a long time. Then he agreed. The hall was quiet during the meeting. He didn't say much. He mostly just looked into their eyes. One boy asked, "Did you kill anyone?" He didn't dodge the question. He just said, "Have you ever had to choose between yourself and a friend?" Like, in a second. Everyone fell silent. The teacher too. After the meeting, the girl from the courtyard approached him. She turned out to be a second-grade student. "I brought you a letter." It was a postcard with a badge drawn on it and the words, "Thank you for not forgetting who you are." He held it in his hands and suddenly realized, he was someone again. Not just the old man from the third floor. And then the phone rang. It was the clinic. The test results were in. The voice was polite, but it betrayed caution, pity, and a studied distance. "We would like you to come in person. Preferably with someone close to you." Pavel listened silently. Afterwards, he just sat down. Like the day after the store. He looked at the card. Then at his hand. It was shaking more than usual. And inside, a war began. Not with the salesman. Not with indifference. But with something that was returning quietly, like a shadow on the wall. He didn't go to the clinic the next day. He just couldn't. He told himself he had things to do. That he needed to go to the pharmacy. That it wasn't the right time. But the truth was simpler, he was afraid. Pavel Ivanovich knew what those voices sounded like, polite, saying, "Come with someone close to you." He had heard them himself when he was young. When he returned from the funeral of his comrades. When he found out that the man who had shared a trench with him had not lived to see the morning. He woke up in the middle of the night in a sweat. He dreamed that he was standing in the same store, only the salesman was himself. And he said to himself, "Take off the badge. Take off your memory. You don't need it anymore." He sat down and turned on the radio. An old song was playing, about cranes. He listened, motionless. His gaze fixed on the ceiling. Only his lips moved. A day later, the neighbors began whispering again. Someone said it was all a publicity stunt. That he had been brought there on purpose. That it was all staged. That the journalists had arrived too quickly, as if the general had known about it in advance. "He's just an old man," said the neighbor from the fifth floor. "There are people like him everywhere these days. What is he trying to prove?" They didn't know he could hear them. But he heard everything. One morning, someone wrote the word "hero" on his door, but not with paint. With lipstick. No one knows who did it. He wiped it off. Without complaining. And then the phone rang again. At first, he didn't pick up. But then he pressed the button. "Pavel Andreevich? It's me again. Vishnevsky. I'm sorry it turned out this way. What happened?" "They fired that boy. The salesman. Without a trial, without a commission. Just, they issued an order. The administration doesn't want any fuss." Pavel was silent. "We did something to restore justice," the general continued. "And now they're pretending it never happened. Everything is dust. Even victory." "Did he apologize?" Pavel asked quietly. "No. But would you like him to apologize?" He didn't answer. He just hung up. In the evening, he went out onto the balcony. He sat down on a stool. The wind was fierce, biting his fingers. He took out the badge again. He looked at it. And again, he clenched it in his hand. He was called back to the school again, this time to a local forum. He refused. "I don't need a forum," he said, "I need the girl with the loaf of bread not to be afraid of old men with medals." He received the letter on Monday. No envelope, just a sheet of paper tucked into the mailbox between advertisements and receipts. The paper had the clinic's logo and official text. "Lesions have been detected, urgent consultation with an oncologist is required," he read and didn't read at the same time. It was as if the paper wasn't in his hand, but in some other time. He put it next to his daughter's postcard. Then he closed the mailbox without even taking his pension, which was lying below in a gray envelope. At home, he turned on the light, and turned it off. He walked through the rooms. He looked at old photographs. At the calendar, where his daughter's birthday was circled, out of habit. He sat down. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't pour himself any tea. He just sat there. And he realized that he was tired. Not from resentment. Not from age. But from a meaningless struggle. In the evening, he dialed the number. The same one, his daughter's. The phone rang for a long time. He was about to hang up when he heard the answering machine. A woman's voice, but not hers. A foreign accent. Then a signal. He didn't say a word. He just breathed. And hung up. All he had was a badge, a photo, a cane, and an old pea jacket. Everything seemed foreign to him. He took off the badge. Put it in the ashtray. He thought, maybe I should throw it away after all. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. He didn't answer. The knock repeated. Quieter. Pavel Andreevich? It was the girl. The one. He didn't open the door. He just sat down on the floor by the door. And listened to her standing on the other side. She didn't leave. And in that silence, it became especially empty. He didn't sleep all night. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. He closed the curtains. Turned off the lights. Sat on the floor, leaning against an old nightstand. His body ached, his legs were numb. There was silence in his chest. Not emptiness, no. Just silence, like in a bunker where even the radio doesn't work. He thought about those he had buried. Not literally, those he had lost. About his wife, who had left first. About his colleagues. About his daughter, who had stopped writing. About the boy with the question, "Did you kill?" About the salesman who didn't apologize. He wondered, maybe it was all for nothing. But then a voice popped into his head. An old voice, with a hint of smoke in it. Even if no one remembers who we were, we don't have the right to forget. He didn't know who said it. Maybe it was someone who had long since passed away. Maybe it was himself. He stood up. Slowly. Every movement echoed in his ribs like a nail. He walked over to the table. Opened a drawer. Took out a box, forgotten for 10 years. Inside were 2 letters. One was from his commander. The second was from his daughter. Written sometime in her childhood. There was a drawing of him in uniform. And the words, "Dad is the strongest because he protects everyone." He placed the letter next to the medical report. He looked at it for a long time. Then he took the badge from the ashtray. He pinned it back on. Not to his pea jacket, but to his regular shirt. Slowly. Deliberately. He sat down and began to write a letter. It didn't matter to whom. To himself. To his daughter. To life. I am. I was. And I still remember who I am. The next morning, Pavel Ivanovich got up early. No coughing. No pills. He just got up. It was cloudy outside, the sky the color of aluminum. He went out in his usual clothes, but with the badge pinned on. This time, not as armor, but as a sign. Quiet, without fanfare. He sat down on a bench near his house. In one hand he held a thermos, in the other the letter he had written the night before. There was no envelope, just a piece of paper folded in four. The girl came out again with her mother. She saw him and ran up to him. He stood up and handed her the letter. "Give this to your mom. Let her read it. Maybe she'll pass it on. It doesn't matter where. Just pass it on." She nodded. She took it with both hands. Carefully, as if it were something fragile. "Will you come back tomorrow?" He nodded. For now, yes. The girl didn't keep the letter. A day later, her teacher read it at the school assembly. Then the girl's mother read it at a public meeting in the city. Then a journalist who was in that very video. It was written in uneven but firm handwriting. "I don't need you to bow down to me. I need you, when you see an old man with trembling hands, to think not of illness, but of time. That these hands once had other tasks. That these eyes have seen things you'd rather not know about. That badges aren't just for show. They're bones of memory. And if you've forgotten who's in front of you, that doesn't mean he's forgotten. Memory doesn't ask for likes. Memory demands respect. Just respect." The letter went viral. No name. No signature. Just from an old man who someone once asked to take off his badge. 3 weeks later, Pavel Ivanovich finally came to the clinic. Alone. The doctors were surprised. He knew the diagnosis, but he didn't panic. "Do I have time?" he asked. "Not much." He nodded. "Then we'll live while we can." He returned home. He wrote a short note to his daughter. No reproaches. No questions. "I'm sitting on a bench by the entrance. In that same pea coat. If you ever want to find me, don't look for the number, look for the badge. I'm still wearing it." He didn't know if it would reach her. He didn't wait. In the spring, people began to recognize him. Not by name, but by his badge. They nodded silently. A salesman from another store approached him and handed him an apple. "We give them to veterans for free now. Not because of the law. Just, because you're here." He didn't refuse. He smiled. He thanked him. Then there was another meeting at the school. He didn't read about the war. He read about politeness. About how important it is to notice people. Not their uniform. Not their age. Their eyes. The children listened. On his way out, he suddenly felt that he wasn't walking, he was being led. By the hand. A boy of about 10 was holding his hand. He offered it himself. Just like that. One evening, he was sitting in the yard again. It was May. Warm, smelling of smoke and earth. A young man approached him. He was well dressed, his hair was combed. A salesman. The same one. "Back then, it's too late," Pavel said quietly. "But don't be silent." The young man sat down next to him. "I got fired. But maybe it's for the best. Now I work with children. I try to teach them that words are also weapons. Good weapons," Pavel nodded. "If they don't cut." They sat for a long time. Without accusations. Without resentment. And then Pavel stood up. Slowly. With effort. "I'm going home. Tomorrow is an important day." "What's happening?" "Tomorrow I'll be a grandfather again. I think it suits me." The next day, a car was parked outside his house. A woman got out. She was about 40. Reserved, tired, with eyes that revealed everything at once, anger, pain, and hope. "Dad?" He didn't turn around right away. Only when he heard, are you still wearing that badge? He turned around and said, now I always will. In the evening, the three of them sat together. Him, her, and the little girl, his granddaughter. They drank tea with jam. They looked at photographs. They laughed. Sometimes they were silent. But there was no longer any loneliness in that silence. The old man was standing at the shop window again. The same shop. The same apples. The same price tags. But everything was different. He held an apple in his hand, turning it slowly, as if checking it for rot, for sweetness. Behind him, there was no hustle and bustle, no whispering. The salesman was new now. Young, wearing glasses. He saw the badge and nodded. Without a word. Just respectfully. Pavel took 2 apples. Not just one. Standing next to him was a little girl, his granddaughter. She was holding a bag and looking up at him. Grandpa, do you remember which ones you like? He nodded. Smiled. And they went to the cash register. Slowly. Together. And on his lapel was the same badge. Not new. Not polished. But real. If this story touched you, write the word, I will remember, in the comments. Because respect starts with something simple, not forgetting. Like this post if you also believe that even one voice can change someone's destiny. And subscribe, there are more stories ahead that bring back memories to those who deserve it.